I've always kind of looked up to the Howard Sterns and the Larry Kings of the world that are the best interviewers, and they can extract really important information that is sensitive information from people. And I think that that's a trait that you really need to have to succeed in this business.
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSalle here, CEO of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And I am joined today by Gerry Spitzer, who is a founding partner of Questor Capital Partners. And before I officially welcome Gerry, I first want to say thank you to Joe Milano, a good friend of mine that I've become close with in the industry. And it's because of Joe's introduction that Gerry and I are here and talking today. So Joe, if you're listening to this, I appreciate you. And Gerry, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Of course. So walk us through, I'd be shocked if you came out of the womb, so to speak, and became a financial advisor. So what was kind of your journey through school to the professional side of your career? What were some of the steps involved to get you to where you are today?
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Grew up upstate New York, and I knew that I always wanted to kind of be in the business world, but I wasn't sure exactly what direction to go. So I ended up going to a school, Binghamton University, upstate New York, and majoring in accounting there because that was the major that was going to get me a job in New York. I kind of had determined that I was going to move away from upstate into New York City and kind of try to build a life around New York, a career at least. So ended up working for Price Waterhouse out of college, and which was Coopers and Lybrand back then. And basically, public accounting was great for a couple of years. Got my CPA, which is helpful. And then basically was not enthralled with the accounting world. It wasn't exciting enough. So I really kind of moved in a direction toward financial markets. But before I went that direction, I had an opportunity to get into the computer world. And basically at that point in time, the kind of early 90s, the PC really was just developing, and it was a really exciting time. So kind of getting into sales and understanding that business was fascinating. So I did that for 3 or 4 years, really figured that I wanted to be involved in a business that related to people, and whether it's kind of sales related in some ways, but also kind of using your brain. So I really wanted to go that direction. So I fell out of the computer world after margins started declining, and I really wanted to build a long-term career, and I did not think the computer business was going to be that. So I ended up joining the Merrill Lynch training program in New York City. And even though the manager was trying to get me to not join, really, because he's like, there's a 90% failure rate in the financial advisory business, I went for it anyway, and really enjoyed the whole training aspect because it kind of mixed like my love of financial markets, helping people, and the challenge of working with new people. So it really kind of satisfied all those, even though the failure rate was so high. So it didn't deter me. So I created a team with a good friend of mine in the training program that is still my partner today. So it's pretty amazing that to last, 30 years in a partnership, and we're complete opposites. And I think that's really why the partnership works over the long haul. So, I enjoy the planning and people aspect. He enjoys the portfolio management aspect, and it definitely works as a team. So we've built up a team over that long period of time. We were at Merrill Lynch for quite a while, then went to UBS. And then from UBS, as you know, David, we went independent about 2.5 years ago. So that's kind of the way we kind of created and got into the business and all.
Well, I know it's 2.5 years late, but welcome to Freedom Land. Although I think that you would attest that being a part of Merrill Lynch and UBS got you to where you are today from their training and their support and the infrastructure, and ultimately empowered you to go independent. I know when I was at Northwestern before leaving there, I look back and I'm like, there's a lot of things that I absolutely love about Northwestern and that I got from Northwestern. I just wouldn't retire there. It's not not the ideal place for me specifically. And if I were to guess, you may feel similar about your experience at Merrill and UBS, where you attest a lot of what you're doing now to what you were able to learn at those companies.
Yes. I mean, have the entrepreneurial spirit, like I'm sure you do, David. It's tough to work at a brokerage firm with an awful lot of, basically worried about getting sued and things of that nature. And it's a different environment when you're out on your own. I kind of look at the analogy like when you're in prison for so long, you actually start believing that the food is decent in prison. And then when you get out of prison, you realize there's a lot more food out there in the real world than there is in prison. So it's been really eye opening for us, and I think that the most exciting part of it, the money management and the client aspect in technology is much better. But I think that being able to market our services, especially to business owners, in an environment in the independent space is much better for us and much more interesting. I've become president of the Exit Planning Institute in New Jersey. Not 100% sure that would have been allowed in the brokerage world, but it's like that's fun. And it's exciting creating educational content for business owners around New Jersey and centers of influence to those owners. So that's been really fun, a little bit of a give back and also, for new business, but it's been fun.
I love it. And yeah, you mentioned your CPA designation, but with being the president of the New Jersey chapter of the Exit Planning Institute, we share in the CEPA designation as well. For those of you who may not know what that is, Certified Exit Planning Advisor. And if you have or want to have a focus on business owners, it's a good differentiator in the marketplace. And frankly, it's a designation that you learn a lot from. It's not necessarily as, in my opinion anyways, as rigorous as like the CFP or the CPA exam is. However, it's stuff that you read a chapter in the book and you can apply it the next day. Like it's very, very easily consumed and implemented. I really enjoyed the process of getting that designation to work with folks.
I feel 100% the same. I really enjoyed the process and then really enjoyed kind of using everything you've learned in that process with business owners today and putting together a team around these business owners. It's a lot of fun. I agree.
What was that? So we have a number of advisors who listen to the show who are at the Merrills, UBSs, Northwesterns of the world, and they are considering going independent. And that process can be intimidating. You can also realize, oh, wow, the broker that I was partnered with actually did a lot for me. Like I have to figure all this stuff out. Walk us through what that transition was like and what advice you would have for folks who maybe are a couple chapters behind you, but want to go in the same direction that you guys have gone.
But you have to evaluate the risk, and you have to be willing to take some risk. The path of least resistance is to stay the course and stay in the brokerage world, and you're probably going to earn a good living if you're a successful FA, and they have retirement plans set up. So there's actually nothing wrong with staying in the UBSs and the Merrill Lynches, in my opinion. If you want to kind of take a little bit of risk into a new journey, I would say the independent space is worth evaluating. I'm going to warn you, it definitely takes time and effort, and you can't go to like 5 or 6 different independent vendors and really do your true due diligence, because doing the due diligence took us about 1.5 years. We flew to 2 different places, evaluated both Dynasty and Sanctuary. We ended up with Sanctuary platform. There's plenty of others that are also very good. And at the end of the day, your business is your business. Your clients, your staff are by far the most important thing. But when you choose a platform, you want to try to choose something that's going to give you the right fit for compliance and all the overhead things that you want help with, technology and the like. So you have to do your due diligence. You have to be willing to spend a good amount of time kicking the tires. At least we only chose 2 to really kick the tires, but it took a lot of time and effort if you're doing it right. So I think once you kind of decide to go that route, and you're going to see that the biggest wins for us, I would say, are on the technology side. The technology stack you're giving to work with, and then what the client technology is going to look like. So if I compare the brokerage world technology to Charles Schwab, I think the amount of money that Schwab invests every year in their technology, improving it, their apps, is just much more client friendly. So to us, that was a huge win. And again, like I mentioned before, working on the marketing side is much more fun and interesting, that you can just do all these different things marketing wise. If you have a niche business that you're going after, it's much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I also hear from folks or get questions from folks as to, hey, when I transition, it's a good opportunity for me to trim my book of the people that I don't necessarily want to come with me, that can stay with the advisors at the firm that I'm leaving. But of the clients that I want to make the transition with me, a question they have is what the attrition rate is. Like, is it 90% of people come, 70% of people come? I don't know if you guys tracked it or if you have a gut check, but of the people that you wanted to make the move with you, what percentage of those people actually did make the move?
Look, it was about 90% of the assets. And then I will say that there's several people that we wanted to leave behind that just were not a good fit for us, because in the brokerage world, when FAs leave, they basically hand you a list of folks and they become your clients. Many times that's not a great fit, right? Because they're randomly given to you. So I'd rather develop our own clientele, meet with these people before they become clients, and make sure they're a good fit for both them and us. And in that world, you don't choose. So there was a bunch of clients that we left behind on purpose because they just weren't good fits for us. And I'm sure they're better fits for the FA that inherited that account. So I think that was really important. But we ended up about 90% of the assets. And there's still, what happens is, at the time you leave, clients don't know you're leaving till you actually leave. And many times it's not the right time for them to deal with a big move like moving their assets. So I will say that going the independent route definitely took a little bit more explaining who Sanctuary is, who Questor is, and who Schwab is, and the roles they all play is a little bit more cumbersome than the conversation of I'm going from UBS to Morgan Stanley. So you definitely needed to have that conversation, really explain to these clients what life's going to look like, how it's different, but explaining the wins for them is that you still have the same team servicing you, and the technology is going to be a huge win as well. And the investment platform is much more open architecture in the independent space than working with just the products that the firms allow you to work with. So those things took time, David. And I would say that not everybody was won over day one. There were a certain percentage of people, small percentage of people, that still needed to kind of understand this and agree to it. And then they came, sometimes it was 3 to 6 months later.
And what is your, there was probably a 6 to 12 month transitionary period, right, over that 2.5 year period that you started the process of going independent in terms of setting up the infrastructure, bringing clients over, all that type of stuff. What does the business look like now? What are you guys managing? How many team members do you have? You mentioned your partner that you met in training way back when is still your partner today. What's the current status of the business?
Yeah, we're about to hire our 7th person. So we have 7. We're fairly lean. We left with about 725 million in assets. We're up to about 875 million now.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, we have a financial planning person, we have client service folks, and then we have a portfolio manager and myself kind of running planning and relationship management. So we run pretty lean. But I think at the end of the day, I think we give good client service, and to us, we want to give platinum service, and that's by far the most important thing. And obviously updating people's planning and making sure they're set for retirement and risk and asset allocation, all of those things are important. We're able to do that with our current staff, but we want to keep growing.
Certainly. Well, you're flirting with $1 billion. So whether it's, something that will make you feel accomplished, or you're focused on impact, or there's just, for me, there would be some, sort of, ego-driven excitement to be able to say, hey, hit $1 billion. So whatever the reason is, I think that's the logical next step, is to change out the M with a B.
That's right. Well, look, assets under management is definitely a gauge in our business. But I kind of look at high quality clients that really need our help and want our help and appreciate our help. And there's plenty of those out there, I believe. And as they kind of keep coming in, then I think we'll kind of hit those goals as a secondary goal. But again, obviously it's nice to say you have $1 billion under management, but I think keeping our clients happy is the most important thing at this point.
Most certainly. And let's walk through, I'm curious, of the clients that you currently serve, are the majority of them business owners, or are you more so focused on business owners moving forward with the CEPA designation? I guess, like, what types of people do you serve currently and look to serve moving forward?
So we've had some clients for over 25 years, and I'd say that our mix back in the Merrill days, we have corporate executives, business owners, and a random mix of folks inheriting money as well. So our book is a random mix. Over the last 10 years, most of our new business has been business owners and working through that whole exit planning process. But again, our current book is a mix of folks where we work on wealth management, asset management, estate planning, charitable giving, and then an ultimate exit for the business owners themselves.
And that's I've worked with a number of folks who will work with business owners, and oftentimes the lion's share of their net worth is wrapped up in their business, and they don't have a ton of investable assets. So what they do is, and I think you're doing something similar, is helping them on the business side of things. And then when they ultimately do exit, you're sitting there ready to catch the assets because you added so much value in the interim and helped prep them for that ultimate exit. So there's what I've seen when people do that is there's like nice big pops, moving forward as people exit. So that's a cool,
I agree.
cool scenario.
I mean, you get the opportunity to build rapport, David. I mean, look, when you're helping somebody with the exit process, you're building a rapport with them. They're going to make a decision along that process whether they want to work with you or want a long-term relationship, as we will. And I think that, like any good relationship, there's always a dating phase before you kind of lock in. And I think this process allows you with the dating phase. I mean, you really get to help this client and whatever else they need. I mean, we went with a furniture manufacturer down in Florida, and, he literally had 98% of his net worth in the company. And so he's got to exit probably quicker and can't do an ESOP transaction. We'll talk a little bit more about exit options, but, some people, you really have to profile and understand the client's backdrop before you really get into potential solutions. And that's going to take some time and effort. And I think that's a skill we've had for 30 years in doing this. And I think that kind of the therapy part of this business, David, is the most important part, because you really, managing money is fairly straightforward and results are straightforward. Understanding the risk profile, but understanding what that client really wants to do with their wealth that they've built, family, friends, legacy, those things we could talk about a little later too, but those are kind of the most important things to understand before you even get into the true exit planning solutions for the client.
Well, it's interesting too, because I would imagine, because I'm no longer an advisor, I've been out of the game for a number of years, but for you, like you said, the investing portion, the financial planning portion, like, you've been doing it for so long, it's, you and your team could probably do it in your sleep. I feel like when you have an opportunity to dive into the business itself and help prepare them for exit, it kind of keeps you on your toes, keeps you, exposed to new things. And I mean, you shared an example of a furniture manufacturer, and you realize that all these businesses that you come across are vastly different, but they also kind of rhyme to a degree, right? They typically deal with similar issues and problems. So I feel like it helps. My theory for you is that it would help keep things fresh and exciting, so you don't get bored kind of rinse and repeating, doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, this is so far from boring. I really view it as like every business owner you meet is kind of like dealing with a Rubik's Cube. I mean, it's like there's sophisticated puzzles that I think are really an intense challenge to solve. And it's not easy solving them by yourself. You need to put together a team to help solve. And it's not necessarily the bigger the client, it's just, everyone's got a different financial situation. Everybody's a different family situation. Everybody has a different view on legacy, and everybody has a different view on how much they want to help their family. So we have clients that they're not going to have their kids in their wills. They giving everything to charity they're passionate about. So since everyone's different, I view this as, the therapy part of this, the questions and the answers and the profiling is the most important skill you can have as an FA. And that's why I've always kind of looked up to the Howard Sterns and the Larry Kings of the world that are the best interviewers, and they can extract really important information that is sensitive information from people. And I think that that's a trait that you really need to have to succeed in this business, because these are, you're getting to the core of people of what they want to do with their money. Because ultimately, I don't think most of these business owners are worried about their next meal or, their day-to-day expenses or travel. But if they think about what their wealth is and we project out what their wealth is going to be, they're going to have an opinion on where that money should go. And I think that that's what you really have to help people with. And I think that that builds good long-term relationships with these clients and families.
Sure. Well, and you mentioned two great interviewers, but you forgot to mention David DeSalle and that.
Oh yeah, no, he's third. He's third.
I'm just teasing. Well, I'm curious. So I had a good conversation, and you may recognize the name because he was big in sort of the broker dealer space, Joe Jordan. The episode will be released by the time this episode is released, but it's not released at the time of this recording. And one of the things that we had discussed was helping clients retire to something as opposed to retiring from something. The whole idea that if someone decides, hey, I'm going to drink Coronas on the beach and, smoke a cigar every day, it's fun for 4 days. And then you start slowly dying if you're not kind of challenging yourself to a degree. I'm curious to know what process do you bring some of these business owners through, if we're using the CEPA lingo, as they enter their third act of life, when a lot of times their identity is wrapped up into the business? How do you help them plan out that third act for ultimately when they do sell?
I mean, that's a great question, because I think that is the biggest procrastinator for most of these business owners. It's about just dealing with what's life going to be like after they're not needed at this company. And one of my initial questions is really, what does the succession plan look like? It's probably the most important question, because even a buyer of that business, whether it's an ESOP or private equity firm or a strategic buyer in that space, they're going to want to know what the succession plan is. So that owner really has to take it upon themselves to come up with a plan of, God forbid they're hit by a car tomorrow. Is this company going to succeed? Who's going to run it? Who's in charge? And that's a pretty mature thing to have to deal with. And that's what they have to deal with. And then what does life look like after they're not needed? And, a lot of people say they're going to go to the gym more. Okay, but that's an hour and a half, hour every day. But after that, there's a lot of time to fill. And I'd say that we try to stress to people that you really need to think about this. But again, it's like telling somebody to eat better. I mean, you don't know if they're really going to do it after you discuss this with them. You really have to kind of hit a chord in them for them to really think this through, because, and we work on a lot of ESOP transactions. The interesting thing about that transaction versus the private equity transaction is that an ESOP gives you a little bit of runway. So we said to clients all the time that you're selling your company to an ESOP today, but you can stick around 5 to 7 years to get paid your seller's notes and to still run the company. So whether you're in your 50s or 60s, everybody has a kind of different end date where they will actually want to leave the firm. So we kind of just work out a timeline with them, because it gives them time to also build that succession plan and build a plan for themselves of what to do with their, their spouse or their family, whatever they're going to do post that company's involvement with their life. And it takes time. And sometimes I find that because I'm not really qualified, I might be qualified to tell somebody what they need to do, but I'm not qualified to tell them, go out and take some lessons to play golf, go out and do this. Because we had a client once that basically said he's retiring, and he had plenty of assets. We did all the planning, financially fully fine. Goes out, calls me up in 4 months later, said I took a new job. I said, what happened? He goes, I couldn't play golf every day. I was bored and I didn't have another hobby. So I always stress to people that story that you need to find kind of other things to do other than running this company to successfully kind of step away. So there are executive coaches out there, as you know, that will help people kind of explore this. And it's basically glorified therapy to explore what are your hobbies and interests that you could do away from the business, because ultimately you don't want to, kind of die inside the company, someday.
Well, yeah, I've seen a good amount of folks out there that have either or have both brought on either people on their staff to help with that life planning with them, because that happens all the time where they get bored and then they just go back and get a job, and maybe that's what they want to do, and all the power to them. But oftentimes it's because they're going back to what they know the best, because they haven't really spent time exploring themselves and their passions yet. So they actually either bring someone on staff to help with that life planning or have just a great referral relationship. The other thing that I've seen them do is, I don't know if you've heard of Blake Brewer with Legacy Letters, but he provides a service that helps alongside like an estate plan where they're given direction to their assets. It's here's the love that I want passed on, the values, the this, the that. So it helps sort of memorialize the teachings and keeping that family strong together. And those, I would argue to a degree, like touchy-feely things, oftentimes are the things that wow the clients above and beyond getting them a good return on their portfolio.
That's right. And I think family meetings help with that. Especially, we deal with a lot of family legacy businesses. So I met a company in the dairy business, and basically it's been around for 4 or 5 generations, but the 2 current brothers, one has no children and one has children that have no interest in the business, and they need to find a solution. And it's easy to kind of keep working and keep making money and all that, but eventually, God forbid somebody can't work for some reason. Like, you need to really address this. And I think convincing people it doesn't matter their age, because, some people in their 50s want to retire by 62. So it's not really an age thing. It's just, if you give yourself like a 5-year time frame, that's the time to really start delving in and getting this thing done, is about 5 years before you really want to step away. And if you don't really know when you want to step away, that also, can be an issue. But I think I agree with you that the life coach is something that a lot of people probably fight. I don't need a life coach. I know what I'm doing, but there's definitely a place for those folks with these owners.
100%. And it's, I don't know, I'm nowhere near retirement yet, but as I kind of envision that on my end, I'm like, retirement, quote unquote retirement, whatever that ends up looking like, that's either going to be me slowly dying or continuing to thrive and live. And it's going to be dependent on how I spend my days. Because if I'm sitting there, and I'm very much being ageist here, but if I'm sitting there doing crossword puzzles and word searches, like, I'm only going to last so long. So it's like trying to figure out where can I spend my time and what am I passionate about? Where can I give back so that I can continue to like live that life and not slowly die?
So you kind of made me think of an interesting, and I think a really important part of this process is convincing the owner that I or someone should assist them in building a team around them. And he or she may say, oh, I've had this CPA for the last 20 years. They're great. Well, maybe they are great. They might need a fresh look, or maybe they don't understand the exit planning process. But, a CPA, an estate attorney, a financial advisor, planner, life coach, like surrounding yourself with high quality, good professionals is pretty much the key. And it is a very difficult thing to do. Getting, like I call it when you do an exit transaction, I can find you the 18. You definitely need the 18, because if you have one weak link in the process out of this, it's going to create havoc for the transaction. So you need a good estate attorney. You need a good CPA firm that understands the business, that understands exit planning. You need a financial advisor. You need to kind of put all these pieces together and surround yourself with the best quality people you can have for the long haul and also for the transaction itself. Two different sets of people in this could be.
For sure. And in that process, there was a friend of mine when I first got into consulting and, had no revenue and, just straight up starting off. And I started bringing on clients, and the clients were managing maybe 50 million bucks or 100 million bucks. And it slowly but surely crawled my way up to working with billion-dollar firms. But when I first started, one of my friends was like, "Hey, no offense, but you're not making any money yet. What value can you add to someone managing $100 million that has $1 million in revenue?" And I, first of all, like kind of stung because I was like, "You're kind of right." But then I thought about it and I was like, well, anyone can learn anything from anyone if they suppress their ego and they enter a conversation with an open mind. And I share that story because as a business owner, you're used to running the show, so to speak. And in this process, you need to still be very much involved, but also take a back seat and allow these different professionals in their respective disciplines to teach you and guide you. And that causes you to suppress your ego and keep an open mind. Do you find that there's oftentimes like some resistance with business owners at the beginning of this process, and or do you find that when they enter it, they're ready to go and they already enter with a suppressed ego?
Oh no, there's always resistance, and it's just a matter of how hard the resistance is and whether they're really. Because I said, look, you're jumping into the top of the first inning of a 9-inning game, baseball game. I mean, it is not quick. It's not instant gratification. But if you're ready, this is the right time, the right process, and will put you in touch with the right people. So it's, the owners definitely resist and procrastinate as much as they can. And then you get people that call you. So I got somebody that called that was probably 78, does furniture design. And I said to him, look, I know you want to sell the business, but who's going to buy this business if you're leaving? I mean, you're the man. You haven't built a succession plan or a team around you. So why would I or anyone else buy your business? And he didn't have an answer except that he just wanted to sell and get some cash out. Because look, ultimately, owners can resist, but you have this liquidity conversation with them. And some of them don't need liquidity. Some of them do. If a lot of your money is in this business, you need liquidity. If you've saved and invested over the years, then maybe you don't need it. So that's an important part. Legacy, our family members involved in the business, and then obviously taxes. You could do an ESOP transaction. If you're a C Corp, you could literally sell your company without paying any capital gains taxes. And people kind of can't believe that exists, but it's both sanctioned by both Democrats and Republicans in the government. And the United States has favorable tax laws that favor these ESOP transactions. And owners all say all the time, like, yeah, I don't want to talk about selling to private equity because I know I'm going to lose control. But I'm like, well, in ESOP, you can keep control, not pay taxes, make your employees the owners, really reward your long-term employees, and build in incentives for your top management that are not selling shares. And they're almost like it's too good to be true. And I said, look, the biggest negative is that going back to the building this team, it's not as easy as, David, you're private equity, you're buying my business. We meet several times. You look at my financials, you make an offer, you send over the offer, we accept, you wire in money, and then the transition happens. In an ESOP transaction, you have several different players, and it's a sophisticated transaction. But if you can find the A team, it sometimes can be the best transaction for everybody.
Yeah, what I gathered there, and I'm slightly busting your chops, is you have a little niche inside the furniture world. You mentioned furniture manufacturer, furniture designer.
Yeah, well, furniture. Also, we've dealt with neurosurgeons. We did a transaction for a group of neurosurgeons, and that was not an easy transaction, trying to get 14 neurosurgeons to agree on an exit. Different ages, high compensation, as you can imagine. So it's no, but I think that, like, you got back to like the challenge and the fun of the business is that you deal with these business owners, they're all different puzzles. And we're talking to an IT services company today. That's completely different than neurosurgeons and furniture manufacturers, right? So I think the challenge is kind of understanding enough about their business and their personal life and their personal assets to try to help them through this process. And I think it's a great challenge, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, and it must be cool because you mentioned, the C Corp scenario regarding capital gains tax. You mentioned the ESOP scenario where you're able to empower your team, reward your team, and still maintain control compared to private equity. It must be pretty rewarding being able to have those conversations and see the light bulb moment where they're like, oh, and you're like, I just taught them something. Like, I'm going to have that lasting impact on them, their business, their employees, their family. So being able to guide.
Thank you so much, David. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Here's the interesting thing about what you just said. The referrals that you get, if you do a transaction in the food service supermarket space, for instance, all of a sudden, that person's so happy with the transaction, they tell their friends in the same space, because they don't view it as competitors. They're all friends. And all of a sudden you start getting all these people that you want to talk to about doing an ESOP in their space. So you get referrals from existing clients because they're so happy with the kind of outcome. It's just kind of getting them over that hump of getting into the game. The top of the first is really difficult. Like you say, the resistance. And then they kind of can't believe it's too good to be true. And then they get their attorney in, their CPA in, we educate them. Because many times you'd be surprised how many CPAs and attorneys don't really understand the exit planning space. And I think a lot of those probably should go out and get their CEPAs as well. It's not really meant to be an advertisement for CEPAs, but, learning about that space in the centers of influence like attorneys and accountants and bankers is necessary.
Well, even if you don't get the designation, like there's been friends of mine, like this guy that I know from church. He owns a construction company, does probably $5-6 million a year. He's in his late 20s. He wants to build it up to about 10-12 million and then sell it. And I was like, hey, you should read this book, right? Because the CEPA designation, it's not a textbook. It's based on a business book called Walking to Destiny. So whether you get the designation or not, it's an enjoyable read in and of itself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree.
So, well, Gerry, I could keep chatting with you. I do want to wrap up, though, be mindful of time. But one of the questions before we do wrap up is a book that's had an impact on you. And it's our way of distilling a reading list for our listeners. And the book that you chose, and I would love to know the impact that it had on you briefly, Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Why'd you pick that book and what's the impact that it had?
Well, I think that learning about how his mind worked is, and especially an entrepreneur like he is, was fascinating. And that, I think you just, like you said earlier, you need to have an open mind. And I think he did, and he took chances. And I think a lot of it is managing risk in your own personal life and business life. It's just like what makes sense. And he took risk and succeeded. And it was kind of fun to, read about his journey. And I think it's somebody you really look up to after you read a book like that.
Love it. Well, Gerry, I appreciate your time today and insight. I'm excited to keep looking on and see you cross over $1 billion. So again, welcome to Freedom Land in the independent space, and where you can market and utilize cool technology. And not only do I think it's super beneficial for you to be in the independent space, but it's going to be a great experience, and probably has been a great experience for the clients that you serve. So I appreciate you joining. Again, shout out to Joe Milano for making the introduction. And for everyone listening, appreciate your time and attention. But again, Gerry, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Take care.